We vervolgen met de klas die Joel gaf op 27 april 1957, pound 5 van de 1957 London Class, getiteld Spoor 1, Transition from Humanhood.
Every Christ at some time or other has been buried in the tomb of humanness. Every single one. And no one knew, no one of the spiritual saints or seers of the world knew that they were to become. Remember that Mrs. Eddy was a housewife, and a very unimportant one. Mrs. Fillmore was a very sickly woman and a housewife, and a very unimportant one, lost way out on the desert at that time, the plains of the Middle States. Always, when you look for spiritual illumination, you will find that seemingly it rose up out of nobody and nothing. Always somebody humble, always somebody who was nothingness and nobody. And then came the light, and it changed. And so it is that we don't know who in this room or the next room is that person who at the moment is hidden under sin or disease or poverty. I'm sure that very few in his days of drunkenness and drugs recognized your Mr. Thompson, Francis Thompson, as a mystic. And yet there it was, hidden all the time under what the world called depravity. The light, which is God, the light, which is truth, is within us. And it makes no difference if we're saint or sinner. It makes no difference if we are high or low. It is there. What is determined, or what determines the light outflowing, is the degree of that which Browning said, opening out a way for the imprisoned splendor to escape. And that has its beginning with our principle, to him that hath. If you will acknowledge that you have the light of Christ, the light of truth, at the very center of your being, and then devote your days and your nights to opening out a way for it to escape, you will be on the right path. If you want to write a book, acknowledge that God, which is your very own consciousness, has every book that has ever been written or ever will be written, and that it is available to you. And as you turn within, the day will come when your particular book of life will come forth. It isn't always necessary to try to publish the first book that comes out. But it is necessary to keep turning within in the realization there isn't a one of us that hasn't a book of life within ourselves, and a book of life that would benefit somebody, not merely give them joy, but give them benefit and help them on in their struggle. But your book must reveal that the kingdom of God is within you, and that it's you that must struggle with yourself, not to acquire light from somebody else's lantern, but using all the available helps that other saints and seers and sages have left for you. Remember that they are only for guides and for inspiration. You yourself must let your original word come from within your being. And so it comes when we come to the subject of spiritual healing. Now, we have had these sessions on knowing the specific truth. But if you will remember, or listen again to these tapes, you will hear that I said that these are not the words that you actually should use in your healing work. They are the words that came to me. When you are called upon to heal yourself or another, I of my own self can do nothing. I of my own self do not know how to pray. Therefore, Father, I turn to you. And you will find that the necessary treatment will come forth from within yourself. It may be a passage of Scripture that you know. It may be something from the metaphysical writings with which you're acquainted, or it may be something that has never before been heard on earth or written on earth. The main point is this: never approach healing work as if something that you know or something that I taught you was of any avail, because I tell you in advance, it isn't. Knowing the letter of truth is knowing the principles of life. But when you sit down to a specific case, you need a specific truth to come through. And as you learn to sit and listen, it will come through. And it will be the Word of God, and it will be quick and sharp and powerful, and it will do the work whereunto it is sent. It will not return void. Now, there will come a time in your experience, but I say this to you, it will only come after you have healed at least 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 cases. There will come a time when you will not have to give even a spiritual treatment, except in rare cases. When spontaneously you find yourself living and moving and have your being in God, and that alone is the treatment. Just the mere fact that you're around is the treatment. Or the mere fact that you're contacted by cable or telephone is the treatment. You will have hundreds of cases where letters will be sent to you, cables will be sent to you, and the healing took place long before you received them. And the reason is that you're no longer a human being living in a human world of time and space that has to be contacted at a certain date or a certain hour. You will have outgrown that and expanded into the divine consciousness, and then anyone who contacts you will not have to come to your physical attention. They will have their need met by contacting that part of you which is your divinity. But I say to you, that happens only to those of expanded spiritual consciousness, those who have demonstrated that consciousness by countless healings. In the beginning, I will tell you this little history, that in my first year of practice, a case came to me of tuberculosis, and it was my first case. It took 13 months before that was completely met. And in those 13 months, I wrote, the patient was at a distance, I wrote that patient every single day of the week, 7 days a week, letters of anywhere from 2 to 20 pages. And believe me, those letters were not written for her, but for me. I was expounding and stating truth as it came to me. I was assuring and reassuring myself in those letters more than I was teaching. 13 months. Ah, yes. But when the second case of tuberculosis came to me, and it was a man who had been sent home from an institute to die, that case was instantaneously met on the first day. Now this is 27 years ago, and in 27 years I've lost only one case of tuberculosis. Only one in 27 years. Do you see why? 13 months of knowing every single truth that could be known. 7 months of sitting down to meditate on that case and ponder it and let God speak and read every truth that could be read. 13 months of diligent application until tuberculosis didn't master me, but I mastered tuberculosis. Do you see that? That's why I say to you, I've never had any 13-month cases since of tuberculosis. They just seem to almost evaporate with a smile. They go quickly. Now, it has been much the same with other things. I have worked with supply for years, and then all of a sudden caught the vision of it, and then found that those who come to me adjust themselves to a higher sense of supply quickly and without prolonged treatments and so forth. Why? Because the principle is so clearly established in my consciousness, to him that hath shall be given. Only begin to break what you have and to share. Only begin to pour that few drops of oil. That's the principle, and it's so clearly established that it breaks the mesmerism for those who come. So it is. Work with the correct letter of truth. Work with it. If you have to work a year on a case, work. If you have to work 7 days a week, 7 days a week. If you have to give 3 treatments a day or 5, do it. But by the time you've broken that case, you have broken that particular type of case forever and for all those who come to you. So it is. We develop spiritual consciousness under grace. But really and truly, we work hard with it. We work over these cases that come to us. As you know, we are working with these small children who come into this world ill, things ostensibly not of their doing, and we're trying to solve the riddle of that and to break through. And I don't mind telling you, it's hard work. First place, I worked alone for several years with very, very mediocre success. And then I was joined by my wife and Mr. Nowell, and the 3 of us have been putting in hours at a time. Each one of us, when we're alone or when we're together, working over, taking these cases apart in our own mind, doing whatever God leads us to do, to the point where we can break through. And there's a question here, are we meeting with some success? I'm very happy to tell you that we are meeting with some success. I have one boy, and in the last 3 months he has been taken out of a complete state of cerebral palsy to where he can go to school. And our Miss Graves tells us over here that another child or 2 children have been removed from the mentally deficient class and ready for schooling. Yes, we are beginning to break through. But don't think we're breaking through just because there is a God sitting around. We are breaking through because we are working hard under the grace of God to bring through the light of God on these subjects. This is really and truly not a work for people who want to sit around and say, let God do it. God could do it if God could find the instruments through which to come. The instruments that can be the transparency that Jesus Christ was, that John was. When we can become so clear at transparencies, when we are so completely freed of materialism, then the grace of God will flow and touch everyone and raise them up. But don't believe even then that the holiest men and women on earth are going to save you from going through your individual experience of transition from material sense to the spiritual. They may rid you of an immediate disease. Even if we succeed in healing these children, their problems haven't ended, their problems have begun. Because now they've got to face a world, and they have got to have the grace of God with which to face it. And so their problem begins to learn how this was accomplished for them and what they have to do to continue in the way and not sin and go back to their former conditions or worse. No one is going to be relieved of the necessity of walking into heaven on their own feet. Regardless of the help you get, physically, mentally, morally, or financially, in the end it is your individual consciousness which must overcome the world for you. We are praying, and some of you already know this, we have small groups praying around the clock. That means that there is no single hour of the day or night when some infinite way group somewhere isn't praying on the matter of world government and world peace. But don't think that that little group is going to prevent the rest of the world opening themselves up to spiritual consciousness. Oh no, the result of our prayers is not going to be relieve them of their responsibility, but to make them aware of the responsibility that is theirs. Our work won't set anyone free of the necessity of praying, but our work will open consciousness to the greater need of prayer, the greater power of prayer, and, in some degree, the proper way to pray. Would you please tell us how we can help the animal world so as to free them from the terrible injustices which seem to be imposed on most of them? And so I'll answer two questions at once there. You might as well make up your mind to it. The animals are the victims of human consciousness. So there is no way to help the animals except improve human consciousness. And human consciousness is improved by prayer. Now, there are two ways of contributing to the help that can be given to the animal world. One is to engage in some human activity that is intended to help, some humane activity. And the other is to spiritually pray. Animals are the victims of human consciousness. You will watch that as long as we kill animals, animals will kill each other. When we cease killing animals, there will be no longer any killer consciousness in the animals, and the lion will lie down with the lamb, and the lamb will lie down with the lion. Do you not see that? How can you expect animals to be free of that consciousness while we are still at the stage of legalizing killing ourselves? How can we do that? How can we do that while we believe that there's some benefit to be gained by killing our neighbor across the border? How can we stop the animals from being a victim of that same? We haven't freed our own children from that injustice. How are we going to free others? We haven't freed ourselves of that. So the first one to start with is me. When I am completely free of all desire to benefit at somebody else's expense, then that influence from my consciousness reaches yours. When you rise in consciousness to where you no longer believe that you can or that you want to benefit by somebody else's destruction, then your influence will spread even to the animals in your household. Again, I tell you, I have witnessed in my practice over and over and over that dogs and cats, the once chased birds, no longer chase them. And usually one treatment suffices to cure them. Just one. And the reason is they're brought into the spiritual consciousness in which there is no separation or desire for gain, and they are freed by that. I, if I be lifted up, shall draw all men unto me. It is possible to heal cats and dogs of the desire to chase birds, and I have seen it all through my practice. So it is, when we ourselves are lifted up above where we believe that war benefits somebody, then we are able to free others. You stress continually in your writings and recordings that we must forgive enemies, yet God, being love and all power, can have no enemies. That's right. And when you have risen to God, being, you will also have no enemies. But since there isn't anyone in this room who has risen there, you and I, we are all entertaining some belief of enmity. It may be nothing more or less than enmity with a mosquito. But that's enmity, because, as you well know, it usually results in the death of the mosquito. There isn't anyone on our plane of existence who isn't entertaining a sense of enmity somewhere. And as long as we are entertaining a sense of enmity, we have to overcome that sense within ourselves. God has nothing to do with it. God doesn't enter the picture at all. God is perfectly all right. God is infinite divine consciousness and is too pure to behold iniquity. What's that got to do with you or me? Why do you think we're in this room? Because to some extent we all believe in sin, disease, or death, and we're here trying to find a way out of that dilemma. Every single one of us, in some degree, is entertaining the belief in or fear of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, or war. And there's no use sitting around saying that God knows nothing about it. We do. And that's why we are here. And we are here because we entertain a false death, lack, limitation, or war. And there's no use sitting around saying that God knows nothing about it. We do. And that's why we are here. And we are here because we entertain a false sense of God and of man. And we are here to have that sense corrected. Indeed, it is true. God is pure being, too pure to behold iniquity. And we are here for the one express purpose of attaining God realization. And when we have it, we will have no enemies to forgive. But do you think that I believe for a moment that any one of us is reading the daily papers or hearing the radio and not feeling some degree of animosity, whether it's toward Russia or whether it's toward Egypt or whether it's toward Israel or wherever it may be? Do you think there's one of us that has become so pure that somewhere or other we're not entertaining some thought of how we would like to see it come out? God isn't. God is too pure to behold iniquity. And in God consciousness it isn't even taking place. To God we are all one. But just remember this, that you and I are growing to that perfect measure of manhood in Christ Jesus. In our spiritual selfhood we are that. But in attainment, we are not that. In development, we are not that. But at least we who are on the spiritual, metaphysical path, we know the goal. We're probably the only ones on earth who know it. We know the goal. The goal is the attainment of our Christhood. The goal is the attainment of the realization that now are we the sons of God. That is our true estate now. But we will only realize it when our development is so pure that out of this world we will be called to the peace table or the war table, and our influence will be felt. You will know then that we are attaining God consciousness in the degree that we are called into capital and labor cases, that we are called into government cases, that we are called into national or international cases. You will know by those signs that we, some, are attaining that degree of God consciousness and can sit there with enemies on this side and friends on this side and say, no, we are one. Now that day is rapidly approaching. It is already in effect in a minor degree. Already our voice is being heard in capital and labor cases. Already our voice is being heard in the councils of government. Already our voice is being heard in churches and in hospitals. But it's just a whisper. Will you please define exactly what you mean by the words correct letter of truth? Yes. What I've been saying to you today, you cannot in one breath say that God is all power, and then in the next breath say, I wish I knew some truth to remove this error. Now there are people trying to work with 2 or 4 or 8 different metaphysical teachings. And in one breath they're saying God is love and God is all in all, and then in the next breath they're sitting down to do protective work from the devil or mortal mind. There are people who are working with a spiritual truth such as the infinite way, and then in the next breath saying, oh, but there's a mental cause for a physical disease. But you see, that's not what I mean by correct letter of truth. When I say correct letter of truth, I mean this. If you are on the material plane of consciousness, then the correct letter of truth is the best doctor or the best surgeon or the best something or other that you can get. If you are on the mental level of truth, then find the very best practitioner who knows all about mental cause and physical effect and work with that one on that level. Don't go around, though, and find one that's working on one page on that level, on another page on another level, and sometimes on the same page having both levels. Find the one that sticks to mental causation, and you have the correct letter of mental truth. But when you come to spiritual truth, your correct letter of truth is the way you are finding it in the Infinite Way writings, based on God as the essence, presence, power, law unto all effect, and standing on that in spite of appearances, giving no power to effect, whether it's a mental cause or a physical cause. So on each level there is a correct letter of truth, and on each one you find that which suits your particular thing. If you are dealing with spiritual wisdom that embraces the subject of spiritual healing, you can find the correct letter of truth in the message of the Infinite Way. If you are looking for a mental teaching, there is one that sticks very, very closely to mental causation and never deviates from it. And I'm sure that on the material level, you can also find the right surgeon and the right doctor who knows exactly what's right in accord with the material knowledge. And that's what I mean by the correct letter of truth. How can I deal with fear in relation to mental illness of a near relative? You have nothing to do with the mental illness of a near relative. You have to do with yourself. You don't heal other people or correct other people. The result is that they appear to be healed. The action takes place within yourself. How do you deal with fear in yourself? When you come to the place of realization that nothing has power but God, you have overcome fear. When you have overcome fear, those around you will respond to it if they are receptive. If they are not, there's nothing you can do about it, but let them live their own lives, because the Master was very clear on that. I have come to those of my own household. In other words, I can't travel around Rome or Egypt. I can't travel around among the scribes and the Pharisees. The Master had to hold himself to those who are bent on spiritual path. So it is with us. We can't go into the hospitals and heal everybody because we'd like to see them well. We can't even heal our own relatives just because we'd like to see them well. What we can do is study, learn, rise in spiritual consciousness until we've overcome our own fears, and we will then find that we've healed most of them. But those that we haven't will have to go their own way. Can taking Holy Communion help? Well, I'm not in a position to say yes or no. I can only say anything helps in which you can have faith. And the question is, what do you mean by help? I know nothing of any religious rites, ceremonies, creeds, or forms because I've never been through any of them. I've never had the benefit of any of them, if there is a benefit in them. And so I can give you no answer except that the Master said, in accordance with thy faith, so be it unto you.